Hey everyone! There's a theme I talk about quite a bit on my channel, and that's the idea that we'll know we're getting close to actual autonomy when the car starts correcting mistakes it makes on its own in a way that other humans on the road can understand. A lot of people want absolute perfection when it comes to self-driving cars, and I just don't think that's realistic when it's going to be sharing the road with humans. However, what I do think is possible is making the car behave similar to how a human would given the situation and fix its own mistakes without interrupting the traffic flow. And today we have multiple scenarios that showed exactly this. And honestly, at first I thought some of these might have been a fluke and the car got a bit lucky, but then it happened again. And again. Don't get me wrong, you're definitely going to see some disengagements and the beta making some mistakes in this video, but then fixing a few of them with what I would call undeniable intelligence. And I know a lot of you hate it when I use that word, but I will let you be the judge. We'll get right into the drive after I tell you about this video's sponsor, Private Internet Access. PIA has been a long-term sponsor of this channel, and it's also a product I've used for years now, even before the sponsorship, which makes it easy for me to recommend. They're the most technically capable virtual private network out there, and it's a great tool to have at your disposal. Personally, I mostly use it for their ad blocking features and spoofing my location to other countries, which unlocks additional content on all major streaming services, but it also has many other benefits as well, like hiding your IP address and browsing data from your ISP, network administrators, and even government sensors. They're also the most transparent about the way their system works, so much so that they are entirely open source, and if you have any questions about how private it really is, the source code is available for your inspection. They never store any user data, which has been independently verified by a Deloitte audit and proven multiple times in court. They also have servers in every single US state, which has many benefits over competing VPNs. If you sign up using my special link in the description, you can get 82% off and 3 months free, which comes out to about $2 a month. A great price for what you're getting here. They have support staff available 24/7 and offer a 30-day risk-free guarantee on all purchases so you can test it out with confidence. A big thank you to PIA for sponsoring my videos. Alright, let's get into it. We're starting this drive right out of the San Mateo supercharger, and I know the beta isn't currently designed to handle parking lots yet, which will be included in a future update, but it is always kind of fun to see if it can make it to the exit on its own. Turn signals are going a little wild, like usual. You can see it was signaling to the right, like it wanted to just get down to the street there, but figures out that that is not possible. Also, the path prediction shows it squeezing through the car that's directly in front of us, but as it takes another look at the situation, it decides against that, probably for the better. That would have been a little too human. There's also a pedestrian up here who looks like she may walk into our path. You can see autopilot does actually give her the right-of-way, but right when it starts to slow down, she looks at her phone, and then when it decides to proceed, she starts walking again. Yeah, that was just one of those situations with a distracted human. I don't know how it could have done any better in that one. Also goes really nice and slow over this speed bump, much appreciated, and does end up finding the exit for the parking lot. It's our right-of-way right now, but that car from the left is kind of creeping up, but autopilot does take the initiative and takes the right-of-way. Before we continue, I definitely think that little interaction is something we should take a closer look at. As you can see, they have a stop sign and we do not, and autopilot does start predicting their path really early, but just decides, you know what, we have the right-of-way. They're gonna stop for us, and they do. There was a little tap of the brakes there as it was making sure he was coming to a full stop, but pretty smooth. I'm a little torn on how I feel about that one. In some ways, I want it to be as safe as possible and always give the others the right of way, even when they're in the wrong. But on the other hand, I kind of love it. Please do let me know what you think the best course of action was there in the comments. I know situations like that always have people split in opinion, and I'm really curious on what you guys think. I can see both sides of the argument on that one, but one thing for sure is that I think the other guy in the other car who we just had that interaction with had no idea that there was a robot behind the wheel of this car. That was a human move if I've ever seen one. Not quite as human-like up here. You can see it kind of detects this parked car and the other one is a pinch point and slows way down, and then it kind of creeps all the way forward to the stop sign. I would have liked to see a little bit more of a sense of urgency to move through the intersection quickly after an overreaction like that, especially with a car behind us. And while I fast forward through this first section because there's some really interesting stuff coming up, I want to take a moment to shout out Andy Andreas. I'm always nervous about posting longer drive videos like this, and I feel like they need to be cut up and edited a lot to keep things interesting, but he left a comment saying he likes them because they remind him of Euro Truck Simulator Let's Play. And honestly, that single comment changed the way I think about doing this, because I kind of like those videos too and find them oddly relaxing. It's still bizarre to me that people want to listen to my voice in the first place. Thank you, by the way. But to make it a little easier, I did recently upgrade my microphone in a big way, so hopefully you can hear the difference. And a big thank you to those on Patreon who make upgrading equipment to improve the quality of my videos possible. We have a U-turn up here, which is an unsupported maneuver. You can see the message on the screen. I did try to override the accelerator to see if it would try to make the turn by itself. And it kind of went for it a little bit, but then at the very end just hits the brakes, and I did need to take over here. Unfortunately, autopilot still does not have the ability to back up, but hopefully that functionality comes soon. It is going to be a real game changer once autopilot gets the ability to back up and do maneuvers like that. I bet it'll get itself out of a lot more of these stuck situations. And who knows, it might get itself into more of the stuck situations by doing something crazy. I really just cannot wait for that ability. There's so many times where it would just have to just reverse just a little bit to be okay. Up here, we have another pinch point interaction with a couple vehicles ahead. You can see as soon as the van starts moving more towards the center of the road, autopilot did not like it at all and came to a complete stop. We then yield for the other person coming, but as soon as we pull over and wait for him, he waves us through, and wow, autopilot reacts immediately. To be clear, I do not think autopilot was reacting to the hand wave and instead was probably just reacting to how the other car was behaving. But that was enough, and the decision to proceed happened very quickly. Alright, so let me set the scene for you here. We have a left turn and then an immediate right, but that car has also just stopped in a very inconvenient spot. Autopilot begins creeping forward, looking for a way into that driveway, although it is partially obstructed with that car parked like that. And traffic does begin to clear, and the guy in front of us actually turns down the same driveway. So humans can do it. It is possible. Let's see how autopilot gets on. You can hear it getting a little bit panicked there, but does make it into the driveway nicely. The poor guy in front of us wants to reverse all the way back to that parking spot, but autopilot's like, nah, man. So he goes for the one that's directly to his left. Almost pulls out in front of this guy, too. I know I probably should have been nice and just disengaged and gave him plenty of room to let him go where he wanted to, but we're seeing how far FSD can go. For science. There is a couple clunks on the brakes as it snakes its way through here. I don't know why it's acting quite so hesitant right now. It is maybe because our destination's ahead, but usually in situations like this, it has no problem going through these narrow areas. Starts visualizing that stack on the left, which is pretty dang cool, and our navigation point does end right in front of this gentleman to the right and then somebody else in their truck to the left who were looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? So awkward little laugh there. I went ahead and just disengaged and just moved myself out of their direct path to avoid some awkwardness in case that guy in the truck wanted to go somewhere or something, and then re-engaged immediately after. I guess you could call that a disengagement, but it was more out of my own awkwardness rather than anything the computer did wrong. I just happened to choose the exact point where there was like two people talking to drive right in between them. Out of all the places on the map I could have chose. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. So far though, I feel like autopilot is doing a pretty good job through everything, although it hasn't dealt with some of the hardest situations quite yet. There are definitely some moments where it doesn't feel as smooth. You can see on this right turn, it initially wants to get into the center lane, but then changes its mind last second to get into the right-hand lane. Either lane would have been fine, either the center or the right one, but I don't like the indecisiveness and the kind of jerkiness of the steering wheel. I wish it would be more confident about the decisions it's making instead of changing things halfway through. This was the longest red light ever, so I did just make a little cut there to get through that one quick. But yeah, that is one area where the FSD beta still is struggling a little bit, and that is keeping its original decision. We saw a lot of that in the occupancy network testing too. If it would have just stuck to the original path, it would have been fine. Doing a fairly good job slowing for these speed bumps here. I know this isn't really new behavior, but I always like to show it, especially because there's been some oddities with that, where it used to visualize the speed bumps, but now it doesn't, and I get comments all the time asking if it detects speed bumps again. It always has detected speed bumps, at least most of the time. Seems to be kind of hit or miss. If the speed bump is very obvious, then it will definitely slow down, but if it's not as obvious, it might have a harder time. Coming up, we have a unprotected right turn. You can see traffic coming in from the left does not stop at this intersection. Autopilot displays a creeping wall and creeps just the right amount out to get around this fence obstructing our view from the left. It also felt pretty smooth as it was going to a creeping state back to a stop state. It used to have some issues with that, where as soon as it would see a car, it would just slam on the brakes, but now it kind of creeps like a human would. And up here we have to make a left-hand turn at this roundabout. Always hate the turn signals at roundabouts. I honestly think doing nothing would probably be better than what Autopilot's doing. You can see it kind of awkwardly creep into the intersection. Even shows that secondary stopping point. But then as it gets halfway through, it figures it out and just goes for it. I do find it pretty odd that it would visualize that secondary stopping point through that roundabout. It was almost like it was treating it like a Chuck Cook style unprotected left turn where it was going to have to stop somewhere and check for visibility. But that roundabout was on the map, so yeah, really not sure what happened there. We have our new navigation point in, and this does bring us back through the exact same roundabout that we just got done going through. So let's see if it has any better luck this time. Stop signs at roundabouts again. I know, but what can I do? This time it does enter the creeping and yielding state again, but somehow it felt a lot more smooth. You can see it's doing this with a lot of speed and confidence. Nicely done. That's how you do a roundabout. Now we have kind of a sweeping right turn. It's actually not the right that you see like at this light, but it's a little bit further ahead. And you can hear the right-hand turn signal going on and off, almost randomly. I wouldn't be using a turn signal in this situation, but I can see why it's confused. Also more indecisiveness here where it has trouble picking a lane. You can just see it's back and forth and back and forth. Definitely not very comfortable in the car, and I wish it would just stick to its original decision. And moments like those make it feel a lot less capable than it actually is. It usually has the right decision right in the path planner as like the number one thing it wants to do, but then it almost feels like it's second guessing itself. It really does almost feel like a student driver, very indecisive about what lane it should be in and what it should do at any particular time. We have a yield ahead, which is usually something Autopilot slows down for super dramatically, but this time it actually only slows down to about 15 and goes through it really, really smoothly. Nice to see some improvements there. We then have a left turn into this driveway, and it ends up being a gated community. It initially feels like it's going to do a really nice job getting us in here, but then as soon as it sees the fence, it freaks out and slams on the brakes and tells us to take over immediately. There's a message on the bottom of the screen saying Autopilot aborted for system error. Yeah, not really sure what that was all about. I went ahead and turned the car around manually and re-engaged. These parked cars to the left do make visibility a little tough, but it does a good job not creeping too far out and still does detect the car in plenty of time. We're about to get to another maneuver that I honestly do think displays some amount of actual intelligence. As we're approaching this red light, we get into the rightmost left turn lane because we have a right turn to make ahead, but then traffic ahead of us stops. And instead of sitting awkwardly behind this car in the keep clear zone, it turns on its turn signal and actually moves into this leftmost lane to clear the intersection and traffic can start flowing behind us. And even more amazing, it starts highlighting that car on the right-hand side of the screen in blue, indicating that after it makes this turn, it's going to immediately start hunting to get over into that right-hand lane again. Another small cut there just to save you some time at the red light. And watch it highlight the vehicles in blue, even as we're going through the intersection. I think this is really incredible stuff. And I know for humans, something like that is just like absolutely nothing, but for a robot, the actual decision making and like reacting to things when they happen, and you know, knowing your car is about to block traffic and to squeeze into another lane, even though you have to be in the other lane soon, that's crazy. That's intelligent. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm just imagining things, but here's another one for you. Autopilot does not do a good job in the first half of this clip. So You can see it. We need to be in the right-hand lane there. We need to slow down to get behind the Prius, but it seems like it wants to go in front of it. And it actually accelerates and does a great job. And if it would have just moved over, it would have just been absolutely fine. But at the last second, it decides not to do that. Definitely a repeating pattern here with autopilot. There's also intermittent traffic coming up pretty quick from behind. You can see autopilot seems like it wants to dart into the lane, but every time it wants to, it seems like a car approaches at just the wrong time. I'd love to show you this. Unfortunately, I used the wrong battery in my 360 camera, so it is now dead. My apologies. And you can see it is just, at this point, it's gone too far. I don't think we're going to be able to make this right-hand turn. There's also a cop who pulls up to the intersection like, oh great, this is just perfect. Luckily, he does end up going before us and gets the green before we do. But then another cop pulls up from the right, so our turn signal is still very awkwardly on. My leash for autopilot shenanigans is pretty short, but let's see how it does. Nice job ignoring the tempting secondary naughty right turn there. I'm glad we didn't attempt to do that. It went straight through the intersection. It does slow down a little bit here, but merges into traffic perfectly and then reroutes. Besides the awkward turn signal, I actually think this was handled really well. Of course, there were a few gaps in that right turn that we definitely could have fit into to avoid this whole rerouting situation altogether, but honestly, I'm pretty impressed. It made a mistake and then dealt with it, which is what's going to get us to autonomy. You can see this road in front of us is pretty torn up. Looks like they're redoing a lot of things here, so it's having a little bit of trouble and a little bit of awkwardness, but does get us through just fine. And also obeys all the temporary ground markings with spray paint here. I think the most amazing thing about that last little situation we had is that it knew to abandon the navigation route that it had set. The entire time we were sitting at the stoplight, it still had us making a right turn, but it didn't even look for the right turn because it knew it was already too far. Just really impressive stuff. It doesn't look impressive on the surface, but very impressive. Human driver in front of us, a little bit overly cautious about this bus with his hazard lights on. You can see he slammed on the brakes. Reminds me of something the Beta would do. And we go by the bus very cautiously and then get into the left-hand turning lane. A lot of times the Beta does remind me of a new kind of overly cautious driver who isn't sure about its decision making. I think the biggest issues right now are that the Beta is still so indecisive, like we've seen a lot of times in this video, where it has two probable paths that it's deciding on and kind of just shifts back and forth between them. And also that it doesn't recover from all situations well. But we have been seeing some pretty major improvements in these areas from version to version. Coming up, it acts a little bit robotic, but I can understand why. There's a pedestrian approaching with a very brisk walk, trying to get to that walk button really fast. And the Beta does the calculations and realizes that if he continues walking like that, we're probably going to hit him and slams on the brakes. There was nobody behind us in that instant, so it was probably fine, but I would have much rather it reacted a little bit sooner, as soon as it saw him slowing down. But honestly, stuff like that is the kind of stuff that I expect out of a self-driving car. There was a construction zone back there, and our navigation route didn't put us through it. So ours ends up here, and you'll see me attempting a bunch of times to try to make it navigate through that area, but it keeps routing a different way. So yeah, I'm just sitting here kind of trying to get that navigation route dialed in, and I keep disengaging here. I think I'm going to have to make a U-turn, so I'm trying to figure out how to go through the side streets. But then a human pulls up and shows me how it's done, so everybody close your eyes. A little bit of just a human move here, no big deal. And then I engage autopilot right after. I did engage it while we were still moving, so maybe not the most fair test, but I didn't like the way it was creeping up towards this car who was parking here, so that was another disengagement. Also decides against passing this parking car because of the incoming car we have, so that was pretty nicely done. And then as soon as everything is clear, it does pass him, albeit very slowly. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward until the point where we get into that construction zone, because boy oh boy did I have some fun there. As you'll see, I kind of go out of my way purposely to put the Beta into an extra difficult situation. But yeah, for science. We're approaching a non-operational stoplight that's blinking red, and I realize that the construction kind of like goes to the left. It's for this parking lot. Originally, I kind of just ignore it and let the beta try to get through this, but it was going so slowly through here, I thought that it might just want to try it. So I disengaged and forced it down this little entryway built with cones here. At first, I couldn't get it to engage at all. You can tell me auto steer is temporarily unavailable, which kind of makes sense with what it has in front of it. But then I get really lucky on this last try. But unfortunately, the beta is stuck with fear, does not want to move forward at all. I do try to override the accelerator slightly here, but you can just see in the steering wheel, it does not want to do this. Looking back, it might have actually been for that stoplight. It still showed the stoplight as something it was yielding for. And I engage again because why not? Cool visualizations of all the cones, and you can kind of see it finds the one path that's not blocked off by cones here. Then the navigation route changes on the, you can kind of see on the bottom right of the screen where it has us making a left turn and kind of doing a U-turn through here. You can see on the display it's visualizing that barrier perfectly, but doesn't seem like it's doing a very good job of avoiding it and getting through that gap. It seems like the occupancy network and the path planner are still pretty far separated, just like we saw in my last video. So I'm hoping that it takes more and more of the data coming in from that occupancy network and uses it for situations like we just saw to try to get to its end navigation point. Although that one, going into that area, would have gotten us super stuck. Again, I'm having some trouble activating autopilot here. I'm looking into my notifications to make sure everything is okay. It did briefly show a message saying like autopilot visualization degraded, but yeah, you know what they say, 10th time's the charm. Autopilot tries to go back through the way that it came into that first entrance over there, and so obviously it's not reading these exit signs, so I do have to help it out to get it into the right zone to leave the parking lot. I also put in a new navigation route that'll make us have to do a left out of this intersection up here, which will make things extra difficult because it's basically the left-hand turn is blocked off. You have to go right. So let's see how it does. Behaving pretty cautiously as it has to get close to these cones on the right-hand side. And then it slowly approaches the intersection where it is going to be forced to turn right. Well, I mean, technically, if you look at the cones, it could do something crazy, like go around and make a real left-hand turn. And older versions may have done that. Right now, it's completely stuck. Just like when we were coming in here, it doesn't really want to proceed anywhere. I do end up overriding the accelerator pedal. I just give it a little bit of tap right after this truck goes through just to get it thinking again. And even though it has the left-hand turn signal on, and I thought it would probably be looking for a path going to the left, the path planner actually does seem to surrender, and it makes it all the way through this right-hand turn. You see, I'm not overriding the accelerator pedal anymore. This is all autopilot now. In future software versions, I'd really like to see it kind of like inch its way forward whenever it gets stuck like it did, instead of having to override the accelerator pedal, because I don't think it was going to try that at all. But when it was forced into it, it actually did a really nice job. I think it having the ability to reverse could add another dimension to that as well, where maybe all it needs to do is have a more, like move up a few inches or move back a few inches, because that's all that's needed in a lot of situations, is for it to just have a new perspective. But unfortunately, I did have to override the accelerator pedal in that instance. Kind of a weird situation ahead where we're supposed to make a left turn at this light. You can see the ground markings. The left-hand turn lane becomes a solid line, which you're not supposed to cross over. But everybody does, and autopilot tries, but the car behind us does not give us enough room. I mean, he is giving us enough room, let me be straight, but not enough for autopilot. And as soon as he gets into the inner turning lane, autopilot awkwardly makes the lane change, which gets us stuck between two lanes. But then autopilot changes its mind and gets unstuck. I'm telling you, stuff like this happening so often can't be a coincidence. The light then turns green, and we do have our left-hand turn signal on, and I can tell you 100% that way older versions of autopilot would have definitely attempted to try to squeeze into this left-hand turn somehow. And you can see autopilot was highlighting cars and it wanted to, but a gap never does open up, and instead of slamming on the brakes, it just continues straight on the intersection and surrenders. Amazing. And funny enough, needing to reroute again brings us right back to that same roundabout we were at before. So let's see if it does any better this time. coming off the line with much more confidence, and yes, even though it does display that secondary creeping zone, it completely ignores it and get us through here very nicely and quickly. It's also going to have another shot at that right turn it was very indecisive at the last time. Based on that path planner, probably not going to do very well here. And as the light turns green, yeah, it really isn't. I'm not sure what it is about this particular turn that makes it so indecisive. This is something I should have hit the snapshot button for. But I am pretty confident that the Tesla engineers know that stuff like this is still an issue. So I like to save the snapshot button for more serious cases. I'm going to go ahead and use this last section of the drive for a summary, because this is the point when other cameras started to slowly die off. I think this was over an hour into the drive. Overall, I feel like even though we're still seeing quite a bit of robotic behavior out of the beta, the times when it recovers from its mistakes on its own and gets through some really complex situations gives me a lot of hope for the future. It feels so capable. It's really only a matter of confidence and sticking to its original decision instead of switching back and forth all the time. And as you probably noticed, the vast majority of this video was sped up because nothing quote-unquote interesting enough was happening, which I think really speaks volumes and is a positive sign. The more boring self-driving gets, the closer we are to a car that can drive me around while I edit videos out of the back seat. Thanks again for watching, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. It really would mean a lot. Thanks again, you guys. Until next time. Bye.